This week on X-Treks, alien fights, blinding lights, Kirk and Spock wearing them tight tights.
It's the Ret-Con-A-Rama episode.
Welcome to X-Treks, a podcast where we introduce each other to our fandoms one episode at a time. I'm your host, Erin Cline, and X-Files spooky bitch.
And I'm your other host, Stella Cheeks, a slut for Star Trek the original series. Each podcast, we pick 2 episodes that fit a cinematic theme, watch them together, and then record our feelings.
Our theme this week is Ret-Con-A-Rama.
For this theme, I chose the Season 1 classic, Errand Of Mercy. It's the first appearance of the Klingons and not only sets the stage for Kirk's lifelong feud with them, but it shows us a flat-foreheaded Klingon fleet, not the Klingons of popular culture today. So yeah, this is like a reverse retcon, I guess. But hey, this is the first Star Trek series in all of Star Trek. Like, it was always going to happen that way. It's one of my favorite episodes and was almost my pick for the hook because we get to see Kirk weigh the pros and cons of diplomacy versus militaristic action, a Starfleet classic. And I am always just truly delighted when we get to see Captain Kirk trying to insult anybody. It's chef kiss perfection. He's terrible at it. I love my baby boy.
And okay, listen, this one is like maybe a stretch for me as well, but this episode is too well known and too well loved not to be included in X-Trek, so I'm shoehorning it in for this theme. This week I'm talking about the Season 3 episode, Jose Chung's From Outer Space. This episode centers around the tale of Jose Chung writing his spooky alien book, From Outer Space, and naturally, because we are getting several different viewpoints, we are getting several different views of the story from varying levels of unreliable narrators. This episode is often cited as the favorite by many fans, and is clearly the building blocks for what would later become Bad Blood, including some truly hilarious insight into how others feel about their interactions with Agent Mulder. He's fucking nuts.
I love that we choose the themes and we were like, this maybe works.
I don't know about this one, but it's fine.
Whatever.
Are you ready for digging in there, Mr. Spock?
Always.
Well, there it is. War. We didn't want it, but we've got it.
Curious how often you humans manage to obtain that which you do not want.
Before we begin, a quick-ish summary. Negotiations between the United Federation of Planets and the Klingon Empire have collapsed, and Organia, a strategically placed, peaceful planet, is caught in the middle. The Klingons want it for a military base, but Kirk and the Federation want to protect the Organians from the Klingons, provide them with positive assistance, and if they happen to let the Federation use the planet as a strategic base, well, that's just a bonus, isn't it? Upon arriving at the planet's seemingly primitive surface, Kirk and Spock are greeted by Aelborn, the head of the local council. Despite Kirk's best efforts, hey, it's early Season 1, he's still working on his monologuing skills, the Council reject Kirk's offer of protection, insisting that they do not need to be protected and that they abhor violence. As Kirk is trying to convince the Council of their mistake, a Klingon invasion fleet appears in orbit and Kirk orders the Enterprise to withdraw and rally the fleet, stranding himself and Spock on the planet. Aelborn disguises Kirk and Spock to avoid suspicion, but the ranking Klingon officer, Kor, is drawn to them by their differences. Spock is a Vulcan and gets questioned with a mind sifter. Don't worry, it's Spock, he's got a mind of steel. And Kirk, Barona, because he doesn't have a dopey smile and Kor likes his moxie. Kirk and Spock try to inspire the Organians to fight back by blowing up a munitions dump in a most satisfactory display, but instead of inspiring the Organians to fight, that makes them upset. Kor finds out that Barone is Kirk and is delighted. Kirk's reputation precedes him, after all. But before Kor can rip Kirk's mind apart with his fancy machine, the Organians free Spock and Kirk from capture. As the Federation and the Klingon fleets ready themselves for a confrontation in the system, Kirk and Spock raid the Klingon headquarters in hopes of rousing the population into resistance. The Organians, fed up with Kirk, Kor, Starfleet, and the Klingon Empire, reveal their true nature. They are highly advanced, incorporeal beings of immeasurable power, not the primitive dopes they have been pretending to be. They instantly incapacitate both sides, forcing them to agree to a cessation of hostilities. Violence is not the way. Once they return to the Enterprise, Kirk is subdued. Spock questions his captain, and Kirk reveals that he is embarrassed by his willingness to go to war. Are they truly just as bad as the Klingons? Quite the moral quandary indeed. What did you think of Errand of Mercy?
I liked it. I found the aliens really annoying. Like, really fucking annoying.
The Organians or the Klingons?
No, I liked the Klingons, actually. I found the Organians just like, I can understand why Kirk was so fucking frustrated with them because I was also really frustrated with them. Like, just explain what's going on. It's so bizarre that they're like, well, we'll just allow that this too shall pass. And by the end of the episode, I was like, wow, I fucking hate these aliens. Like, good Lord. I too, like Kirk, was like, we're just gonna fucking murder all of these aliens. Like,
yeah, I love that Kirk is like, look, I don't give a shit about you or your culture at this point. But yeah, I'm gonna go fight and probably die for you. So,
because it's my job, I guess.
God, fuck you guys.
Yeah, like
just all of this sarcastic, like, okay, get fucked.
Yeah, and like I definitely identified with Kirk in that I was just like, what the fuck is the deal with these aliens? So in that way, I'm glad you didn't pick this for the hook, because I didn't feel until like literally like the last 5 minutes of the episode, I was like, oh,
yeah.
okay, I get it. This is very Star Trek. I understand like the bringing together of Kirk and the Klingons. Like I like how the Organian at the end was like, you two will learn to work together and like you will become friends. And they were like, get fucked. There's no way that's gonna happen. And then like 2 seconds later, they're working together. I liked that. I thought that that was a good choice. But I was so frustrated with the Organians that like, if I just turned this episode on, I don't know if I would make it all the way to the end of the episode, because I was so frustrated with this. I also I wrote down in my notes, like towards the end, before they revealed that they were incorporeal beings, like, why are there like no women on this planet? And it makes sense that they're like, oh, you're these like weird military bros who show up, will just like present all of these men as leaders to you. Like, that makes sense in my mind. But at the same time, it was just like, man, I really fucking hate these aliens. They were just so annoying. And like, outside of that, though, I thought that it was good early Kirk. It was weird that he was, like, I've seen Kirk mad. Like, we've done some episodes where he's like, I'm pissed. I need a vacation. I'm so annoyed right now.
I'm over all of
I'm
this.
so over everyone and everything. But this was just like level 10 of that, where he was just like, I'm so fucking fed up with you pieces of shit. Like,
well, it's so hard too, because he's like, I'm trying to help you. I really am, and I'm really trying to do the right thing. And you guys, you're like you said, like, why wouldn't they just be like, hey, we really don't need your help. We're like these magical beings or whatever. But I guess at the end they try and justify it because one of the guys is like, we find interfering with other people's affair disgusting.
Right, but like, why allow these disgusting beings to come onto your planet and just like run amok for like a whole day then? Why not just at the beginning being like, we said we don't need your help. We truly do not need your help.
Yeah.
Like, let me demonstrate to you how much we do not need your help. Like, it's so weird that they had to like, it's like when a parent has to teach a child a lesson, they're like, I'm just going to let you fuck this up so that you can like learn this.
It's totally what they were trying to do, I feel like. Like, learn this on your own. At the end, Spock is like, we're like amoebas to them. Which
Right.
also kind of makes sense, so that at that point they're like, we don't even know how to fucking talk to you guys.
Yeah, I guess that's true too, that it's like they're so far above them. They're like, how do we even explain this to you? Like when you're really good at something, it feels almost impossible to teach someone new, because you're like, I don't know how to break this down preschool style. I only know how to do this at like an advanced level. So I guess in that sense, it does make sense. But when you don't know that going into the episode, it's like, what the fuck is wrong with these people? It was so weird. And like,
Which is like a good audience proxy, because
Yeah.
you like understand why Kirk is being like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Yes.
I'm going to go blow some shit up because you're not doing anything.
yes, I did like the firework explosion. That was
It
nice.
was most satisfactory.
They put a lot into that. That was pretty cool. I was like, oh, damn, getting it done. All right. I like that. I like that they're like, let's just toss a grenade in here and run away.
Spock tosses it and then runs away and his cape billows in the wind.
Yes. This is another great example, too, of when they put the Starfleet people into another society and they give them contemporary costumes, but they always still look very different from everybody else.
Well, even the core was like, you guys have like different vibes. Like, you're a Vulcan, but like, why aren't you smiling like a dum-dum? And he's like, well,
Also, your yellow's real bright. What's up with that?
gotta know he's so captain. He looks very handsome in this episode.
He does look very handsome. You can tell it's very early in the series because you're like, wow, everyone looks really relatively young also, which is like, I've seen a lot of season 1, but it was also like, why do you look so particularly young in this episode?
Babies.
There was some great quality flinging at the beginning. I always love some good flinging. It's something going into knowing nothing about Star Trek. I was like, I'm looking for all the flings. Love a good fling. There's way less flinging in this series than I anticipated, to be honest. And so I feel like this is a nice return to some flinging that we hadn't seen in a minute. 'Cause there's a lot of fighting. And like we've lately in the series of watching X-Treks or watching episodes for X-Treks have seen a lot more fights.
Yeah.
So it was nice today to be like, ooh, they're back to the flings. Here we go. My favorite. So I enjoyed that. I liked that a lot. I thought there were some really interesting details in this. Like I liked a lot of the stuff that they were doing with like prop design and the like additions of the Klingon technology into this like primitive like society that you learn that they've created. Like right away when they drop in, Spock's like, why are there ruins? Like this doesn't make sense for
Why
what
are they
we know.
ruins? Why is everybody so chill that we just like beamed in?
I wrote down, it makes sense that in the Dark Ages, people would just be like, I do not have the time to be tried for a witch for noticing that. I'm just going to pretend like I didn't see it. I cannot even deal with it. Because if you're not like, if you're not in a position of authority to be like, witches, and then immediately burn them to death, it's like, if I noticed this, I'm a witch. So never mind.
I love that reading of that.
Because they just like walk past like, no, do not, I did not see anything. I was not there. Which is like, that's how people react to things now today too, where like crazy shit happens and people just walk right past like, nope, do not have the time nor the energy to get involved in whatever the fuck that was.
People are storming the Capitol? No thanks.
Oh, there's a madman with a bomb in a truck throwing money out his window. I'll just take this money and walk away. Thank you very much. Like that is a thing that people still do today. So that absolutely made sense to me that they were just like, no, thank you. I don't, absolutely not. Fuck that. Now knowing like, oh, well, they're incorporeal beings who are like, oh, someone just appeared. Obviously.
Yeah, they're like,
that's just how people appear, right? That's how things happen. So that made sense too.
and also we don't even know, like, we know that the council, like, they turn into lights or whatever, but all of those people, quote unquote, walking around could have just been projections.
Right.
They might not even be people.
Right. They may not even have like beings inside of them. They might
Right.
just be projections, like you said. I like too that right away the Klingons install that like big fire sconce and then it starts to scorch the wall, which I thought was a really nice detail. I noticed it immediately and was like, interesting. That's weird. What a weird thing to be happening. And now it makes sense. Like, oh, they only built this ship for show, basically, and the Klingons immediately started to destroy it by like actually using for what it's supposed to be used for. So I thought that was a really nice detail as well. I liked the math flirting, obviously.
I love when they flirt in math. It's like, so give me the projections. And then Kirk's like, oh, I love it when you talk dirty to me.
So these are the projections. No, 0.7. Let's get it fucking correct here. Like, okay, Jesus Christ.
I love Spock in this episode because Kirk is going through it. And Spock
Yes.
is like, I'm on your side, but you're also being very dramatic.
Yeah, he's like, God, your emotions sometimes, they are embarrassing. Yeah, this is a strange episode, and we'll talk about this when we get to the ratings at the end, but like, it was weird to feel so annoyed for so much of the episode and then get to the end and be like, oh, okay, I understand this now. I understand how this like fits into the series as a whole. And I wonder too if when I like rewatch this, if I'll enjoy it more knowing that this is what it's building towards and
Right.
not feeling that like same annoyance that Kirk is feeling. I also liked at the end how like they talk, the Klingon commander talks about like, we're very similar. Like,
Right.
we're built organically very similarly, even though we're different. And we have
We're both expanding empires. You just do yours, quote, peacefully, and we do ours forcefully. Like, we,
Right.
we're very similar.
I liked that. And then I liked at the end, you get that real, like, light into that. It's like, wow, they really are very similar in many ways. And so I like that, too, because I know very little about the Klingons. But I was going to say, like, part of it is that I had such a strong idea of what Klingons look like because, like you said, they're...
That's why this is the Ret-Con episode.
Right. It's strange to be like, but where are the Richie boys? Like, I want the Richie boys. Like, it's one of those things where, like, there are small pieces of Trek lore that just, like, leak into larger culture, and that was one of them. And so to be confronted with, like, who the fuck are these people?
Yeah.
But to still have the seeds of what obviously becomes that kind of Klingon.
Right, the like militaristic, the anger,
The
the
aggro,
expansion, the like you are our enemies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. So this one felt too like, okay, I'm getting a big piece of who the Klingons are and become later as the series as a whole. And like some of the makeup is similar from like what I'm aware of, but it's just weird to be like, I know this isn't right. I know nothing about Star Trek and I know something is wrong here. So that like, obviously we picked this for Ret-Con-A-Rama and I could see why, because it's like, truly what the fuck is happening.
It's like a big, huge difference because if you ask any person off the street what a Klingon looks like, they're not going to tell you that. But this is the first instance of the Klingon in all of Star Trek.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Oh, just one more thing about the Klingons. Just as like a piece of technical filming, I really liked at the end the way they did that like extreme zoom on the Klingon. Like they were doing really close-ups of everybody else, but like I like that they made the choice to film it at like almost an angle, like almost a fisheye, because it showed too like even in this moment where they're very similar, he is more aggressive. Like this is a part of their personality. So
right, because you see Kirk realize when he's like, we have the right, and the Organians like to go to war, and Kirk's like, oh, I just fully got put in my place.
Yes.
Where the Klingon is like, fuck yeah, I want to fight on her. Come on, let's go. And like, I think that's part of the reason I really like this episode, because I think this episode is, I hesitate to use the word subtle because it's not. There's like explosion stuff. But like storyline wise, I think it is more subtle because they use the Organians, these like really fucking annoying, like, I mean, Kor, as soon as he comes to the planet, he's like, why the fuck are you smiling at me like that?
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, he's like, I don't trust men who smile too much. I'm like, same, Kor. We are on the same page. But there's like immediately something so annoying about them. And like how when Kirk is talking to them, he's like, we're trying to help. And they're like, we don't need your help, but gives no reason to why. It's like, I'm looking around and yes, you do. Like, if you were going to project to us, like, that you don't need help, maybe choose a different setting. I don't know why you chose, like, Farmville or whatever. They made an alien that is really annoying so that, like, Kirk and Kor, who are on opposing sides and fundamentally want different things but go about it in, like, a tragically similar way, weirdly have a common enemy or, like, common antagonist.
Yes.
So it really does highlight how similar they are. Like, yes, we know their surface differences, and they keep saying, like, this is how we're different. But, like, storyline-wise and how it progresses up into the final scene where Kirk gets, like, put in his place and Spock's like, ooh, that's a checkmate, is really good storytelling, which is part of the reason I really love this episode. I think it highlights that struggle of liking Starfleet and believing in Starfleet and thinking like Starfleet like has this peaceful mission and it's all about exploration and science. But at the end of the day, it does have this really intense militaristic arm that is uncomfortable and that a lot of people in Starfleet struggle with. Like you see this battle internally throughout it. And then especially at the end where Kirk is like having that, he's like embarrassed and thinking about his actions, but it's a struggle of like being a scientist, being a diplomat, wanting peace, wanting exploration, but then also being the captain of the flagship in a fleet with like phasers and photon cannons and like going to planets and like kind of fucking them up. And like we have the prime directive for a reason, but also like sometimes we just explode planets and like it is this uncomfortable balance of being a member of Starfleet and also like being a Star Trek fan too. I think like we speaking as myself as like a Trekkie, like think of Star Trek as this like super progressive, whatever future that we, utopian future that we want to be a part of, which is true in many ways. But like there are a lot of things to still interrogate. Like there's still human beings or humanoid beings that are like complex and complicated. And I just think that this episode, especially for early on in this series, it's season 1, episode 26, is really starting. You see the beginning of that like overall story, that tension in Kirk, but that tension in Starfleet and the tension that like bleeds out into all of other Trek. So I think that is really interesting. And then obviously like picking it for retcon, like these Klingons are super different. Yeah. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, I like to, at the beginning, Kirk says explicitly, I'm a soldier, not a diplomat, which is not
Which is also kind of a retcon, right?
Yeah, because they don't really say that like ever. It's like made really clear like we are not a military ship. We aren't. That's not what our goal is. And it's so to hear him explicitly say like I'm a soldier is like, are you really? Like, and like you said, it does make a lot of sense. Like there are a lot of things that they do that are very military-like, even while out of the other side of their mouth, they're like, no, but we're not. We're like the good guys. Yeah, don't be scared, but also we'll fucking kill you if we have to.
The capacity to kill you. We're just choosing not to, which is like, that's fucked up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that is a really good point. Like, that is another retcon. Like, to be like, to say I'm a soldier, not a diplomat, that is not how he's presented.
Like in every other episode, their whole thing is diplomatic missions.
Right.
Their whole thing is going to a planet and like, okay, we're here to observe and we're really not supposed to be like changing the fate of these planets, even though we do all the time, literally constantly. But like that...
just can't help ourselves.
We just can't help ourselves. And so I just thought that was a really interesting thing to hear him say. Like, I don't believe you.
Right, it feels weird to hear as like a Star Trek fan and like a fan of like TOS specifically. Like, ooh, I don't like that. Like, you're good at military stuff, but I hated how you phrased that.
Yeah, and I also like I didn't know this was episode 26. I would have guessed this was way earlier in season 1. It feels way earlier.
Honestly, who knows when they fucking recorded it? Too.
Right,
like,
it feels like
recorded
it was,
a bunch and shifted around.
It feels like this was one of the first episodes.
It does feel much earlier than later in the season.
Yeah, and again, they look so young. Like they've made choices so young and dreamy and handsome, and they've like made choices about their look that again feels very beginning of season. So I would not be surprised to learn that this was one of the like original package episodes.
So just like fan lore, mythology, apocrypha, blah blah blah. Like before we get into the Klingon stuff, the Organians and the Organian Treaty is like a thing that's been brought up in other episodes in Star Trek throughout or whatever. It is also notably used as a story device in the first ever original novel, Star Trek novel, because there was a bunch of episodes that were rewritten into books by James Blish, but he also wrote the first ever novel, and they used like Organia and the Organian Treaty. It's a book called Spock Must Die. I've actually read it. It's fine. But it is interesting that I like that James Blish is like, okay, I'm writing new stories, but it is important to me to like pull stuff from the series to incorporate in the story. So like that is a fun fact. So in terms of why they chose the Klingons instead of the Romulans, like the Romulans were already introduced earlier in the series, like as we saw with Balance of Terror, but the Romulans took a lot more time and money to do the makeup on because they have the ears and the eyes like Spock. And when we watched Balance of Terror, there were a bunch of them with those like helmets on because they didn't want to spend the time and money, which I think, so then they chose to like, oh, let's create like a new big adversary. We'll do the Klingons because it will be easier to do that hair and makeup.
Hilarious.
Which is hilarious in retrospect because now it is a whole fucking thing, right?
Yeah.
With like the ridges and everything. But back then it was easier to just do like, okay, we'll just put a little mustache on, make your skin a little darker, easy peasy. But it's now like a whole fucking thing, which I think is really funny. So throughout TOS, the series, the Klingons, whenever you see them, look how we see now. And then when the movie started is when the ridges started showing up. Because I think they were like, we have more money and stuff. And also like, it makes them look more interesting. And also the design of the TV show is not great and sort of offensive. And I think adding the ridges and making them look more alien-like and less blackfacey and also less, this is a terrible quote from Gene L. Kuhn, but he said the Klingons should look oriental and hard-faced.
Yeah, I was going to say, they have this like...
It's like a black face and a yellow face like mixed together, and it is very uncomfortable. And so I think it was a really smart choice to be like, in the movies, let's make them look like aliens and not like offensive racist stereotypes.
Right, and especially after they had made the choice to make the Romulans look like space Italians, it was like, this is strange. It's weird that, like, again, this very progressive show is doing stuff that's like... Oh, that's right. This is the 60s. Okay, that's... Yeah, all right. Yeah, weird. It was weird yellow blackface. I did not care for it.
It's uncomfortable. But in the movies, because most of the TOS movies came out before TNG. So in the movies, it is a mix of like the Klingons being like the main antagonist, but then we have... So in the first one, the Klingons are kind of antagonist, but then there's also like this whole fucking feature. The first movie blows. We don't have to talk about it. But the second movie obviously is Wrath of Khan, and then it goes into the arc. But Search for Spock has like a lot of Klingon stuff, as you kind of saw when we saw Star Trek 4.
Yep.
And then Star Trek 4 is about whales. Star Trek 5 is about God. And then Star Trek 6, specifically, The Undiscovered Country, recircles back around and takes all of that history of Kirk and Kirk's like lifelong battle with the Klingons. And that is the focus of that movie. And it's a really interesting mirror to this episode, actually, because in this episode, we see Kirk and the Klingons facing off, at least face-to-face for the first time. And we see how they're very similar, but they also have this like deep animosity, and that grows for Kirk throughout, even though he's like works with them here and there or whatever. And then Undiscovered Country is about not only Kirk's like deep-seated hatred of the Klingons, even though they're like peaceful and like, or they have a peace negotiation with them now, but like Kirk just can't like let it go. It's like a big allegory to like the Cold War is over, but we still hate the Russians type deal. And Kirk really battling with like, am I the asshole here? Like, I feel like I'm right, but also like, well, am I just not good at peace? Which is a really interesting thing. And then, you know, Klingons being like, we're blowing it up, but also talking about Shakespeare. And that is the last TOS movie. So it's a really interesting like timeline to see from the beginning of season 1 to the last TOS movie, this like big ripple effect of Klingons versus Kirk throughout all of TOS. And then obviously people loved the Klingons and they brought them back in TNG and introduced Worf, who was a Klingon on a starship, and then DS9 and whatever. And it's just like such an interesting like ripple effect. And then also to counteract the like fact that in TOS, the TV show, they didn't have the ridges. There's a bunch of in-canon explanations now. Like there's an episode, I think we've talked about it, Trials and Tribulations, where the DS9 crew pop back in time, and they're like, it's an episode where it's spliced with the actual Tribbles thing. And there's a moment where one of the characters is like, oh, these Klingons don't have any ridges. And Worf's like, we don't talk about it with outsiders. It's a part of our history that we don't talk about, so get fucked. But then in Enterprise, Dr. Phlox and the crew find out that the Klingons, inspired by the eugenics wars of Earth, were like, oh, we could super enhance our species, but they fucked up the eugenics and they fucked up the gene splicing and they got rid of the ridges on accident, and they were like, oh shit. So then they undid all of that and then blah blah blah, fixed themselves. Or some Klingons also elected to have like face reconstructive surgery. So Kor, the alien that we see, or the Klingon that we see in this one, shows up in DS9 and has the ridges again. It's like they retconned it completely. They were like, it happened? It's not even a full retcon, because they're like, we'll just give you an explanation as to why it happened, whatever. And then if you want to get really messy, in Star Trek Discovery, they redesigned the Klingons again for no fucking reason. Honestly, it was one, I like Discovery as a show a lot. That was a mistake. Like, Klingons, like you said, are one of those things, even if you don't watch Star Trek, you know what a Klingon looks like. You know, like, it is a pop culture joke, like, whatever. Everyone knows what a Klingon looks like. So to be like, we're doing a new Star Trek, the Klingons look totally different. Sure, they have ridges, but, like, they look, you know, they don't have the hair, they don't have this. And so in that universe, they had to fucking retcon it too and be like, oh, yeah, when they're at war or whatever, they shave their heads or whatever. It's like, maybe it was like a religious thing. I don't know. You know what? We're going to stop using Klingons in the show. We'll just throw them into the future. Never mind. Which is so funny that they had to do it again.
Yeah. Like, didn't you learn your lesson the first time? No. The answer is no.
Yeah, it's horrifying. Just listeners, Bobby just showed Erin a picture of Discovery Klingons.
No. They look like lizards. No.
Yeah, it's not good.
That looks like an X-Files character. Like, that does not look like...
Even in the show Discovery, they later showed one of the main Klingon females with her hair grown back out, because they were like, yeah, we get it. We fucked up.
Yeah, that's... No. Yeah, no. Like, what? Why? Why would you do that?
So the history of the Klingons is very interesting.
Wow.
I just love that line of Worf being like, we don't talk about it with outsiders. And then just walks away
smart.
because Worf is the fucking best. I stand Worf so much.
I mean, that's smart. I like that idea, too, to be like, we do not discuss it with others.
Which is a very Star Trek thing, too, because, like, the Ponfar episode, like, Vulcans being like, we don't talk about it with other people. Like, yeah, we're here to open our cultures and shit, but, like, we don't talk about it. Which is so funny, because humans are like, do you want to know all of our secrets?
Yeah.
We love talking about ourselves.
We love secrets, and we love to tell them.
Where other cultures are like, maybe we'll keep some things just for us.
Yeah. Secrecy's important sometimes.
So yeah, I'm glad ultimately that I didn't choose it for the hook, even though I think it does have a lot of elements. But I think having more of a relationship with Kirk and Spock and knowing more about what Star Trek itself is about makes this episode a little bit better. Also, you don't get a lot of the other crew in this episode. It's mostly a Spock and Kirk episode. Like, you get some Uhura and some Sulu, but, like, it's really just a Kirk and Spock episode.
Also, there's no Bones in this episode.
I know. Can you imagine how different your life
Oh
would
my
have
God.
been?
No way.
You, like, glommed onto Bones immediately. Yeah,
Literally
Bones
immediately. Yeah, absolutely. How can you have a hook without Bones? I would have completely misunderstood the way that the rest of the series was going to work because you don't see the triumvirate. And like I said right away when we watched the hook, I did not understand that Bones was part of this at the level that he was. And so to be introduced to this with no Bones would have completely
been a mistake.
changed. It would have been a mistake. Yeah. I feel like I would have had too many questions also about the Klingons, knowing what little that I did, like without the other context of things that had been going on in this series as well. So I think you made a good decision.
Thank you.
Good at podcasting.
Are you ready for a synopsis showdown?
Are you?
No, but I can go. Full disclosure, everybody, I worked for like 15 hours yesterday, so my brain's mush, so this synopsis is not going to be great. I wrote, this episode has everything. Klingons, costume changes, godlike aliens, moral quandaries, and terrible insults with James T. Kirk. The legacy of Star Trek has begun. Also, we didn't talk about that real quick. The fact that this is another episode that has like a godlike alien species, which is a thing that Star Trek loves to do. But this one is like, we're godlike alien species that like doesn't like violence and we just kind of want to be left alone versus all of the other godlike alien species that are like, we want to fuck shit up.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense with the different ways that like we as humans view different kinds of gods too.
Especially the Organians being like, Kirk, we don't need you to monologue. We're going to do the monologuing.
Yeah, we do the monologuing.
We do the monologuing here.
Spock and Kirk meet the most irritatingly peaceful aliens of all time who trick Starfleet and the Klingons into being nice to each other. Kirk feels embarrassed until he and Spock do some math flirting on the bridge, and then all is well in the universe.
Yeah, I mean,
that's it. Yeah, that's all. It's time for Mulder, it's me.
Hey, I just got a call from some crazy bleephead claiming he was an eyewitness to this alien abduction. You feel like talking to this blank hole?
All right, let's start it off with an episode summary. This one is not short.
How could it be?
Oh, God.
Honestly, I do not envy you writing it.
I did my best. Let's just start with that.
Nobody tunes in for the summaries. Let's be real.
I hope not. We're going to get an email like, actually, my favorite part is the summaries because they're wild.
I like to hear your voices in distress.
All right. Two teens are abducted by aliens. Or maybe not. Scully believes that the facts point more towards date rape, while Mulder, unshockingly, is convinced it's definitely alien abduction. Meanwhile, while all of this is happening, a famous author is writing a book about alien abductions and the paranormal, for which this case has become the central study. Mulder, in the most Mulder of moves, has Chrissy, the girl who was abducted, undergo hypnosis to see if she really was abducted. Surprise! She describes being on an alien ship and the aliens they encountered. The boy remembers it quite differently, with much more torture and a smoking, freaking out alien, which spins everyone into a tailspin. Next, we meet Rocky, a man who claims to have witnessed the abductions and then written a screenplay about the incident. He recalls being threatened by two mysterious men in black and also being taken to the center of the earth by a third alien. Scully, obviously, thinks that Rocky is nuts, while Mulder, obviously, is like, I don't know, man, some of that sounds like it could be real, and has Chrissy re-hypnotized, because of course he does, to get to the bottom of it. Only this time, Chrissy says they were abducted by the military and brainwashed into thinking that it was aliens, which, to be honest, makes way more fucking sense. Finally, we meet Blaine, who, in my opinion, is the best character in this whole fucking circus, who roams the woods all night looking for UFOs. Blaine finds what he believes to be an alien body and gives a truly hilarious recap of who and what he thinks and believes Mulder and Scully to be, and is subsequently allowed to videotape the autopsy that Scully performs on the alien. Psych! It's definitely a human in an alien costume, and Blaine bails and Ralphs. The military show up to claim the body, but it has mysteriously disappeared, and Mulder tricks the military, as Mulder is wont to do, into revealing the name of the second missing pilot. Mulder finds the military missing pilot and takes him to a diner, where he explains what happened to him before being whisked away by his military cohorts. But wait! The server of the diner remembers something quite different, mainly that Mulder is absolutely fucking nuts and interrogated him about aliens one question at a time while eating an entire pie. Mulder goes back to Scully's room and finds her in a trance with the two men in black. It's Jesse Ventura and Alex Trebek! While Scully has no memory of this whatsoever, but does wake up with Mulder in her room, does not question it, because that's what Scully does. Shortly after this, the two missing pilots are found dead in a plane crash, and Mulder begs Jose Chung not to publish his book, because it will further discredit UFO researchers. Jose Chung is like, LOL, suck it, I'm definitely publishing this, because money! And the episode ends with Scully reading about the various fates of the characters we've met so far, including Mulder, who is accurately described as a ticking time bomb of insanity. The end.
You nailed that.
Thank you.
You really crushed it.
I tried. There's so much going on in this episode.
Oh, the writing was done really well. I just meant like the delivery.
Thank you.
Good job. You only messed up once. I'm jealous.
Thank you. How did you feel about this episode?
Okay, up top, I know anybody who listened to the teaser trailer, and we've talked about it a couple times, I was like, the first time I ever watched The X-Files was in my 9th grade English class. This is the episode.
Yay, we found it.
It took like 10 seconds, and I was like, yep, nope, this is the one. This is the one. Which makes a lot of sense, because this whole episode is a writer interviewing Scully, but then also is about how like the truth is objective and like the power of storytelling and blah, blah, blah. And it's just the most English teacher-ass thing to be 100%. Like,
100%.
I'm a nerd, but also let's talk about the power of literature through the medium of television. Anyways, I don't want to teach us our watch this episode. We did, if I recall correctly, which honestly, who knows? I have a terrible memory. But I think we watched this episode and then had to write a story with an unreliable narrator.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That is a good writing exercise.
It is a good writing exercise. Like, the first time I ever remember watching Star Trek was also in a TV, which was also in a class, and it was a social studies class, and it was an episode of TNG or whatever, which was also a really good use of a writing prompt. So like, shout out to nerdy ass teachers.
Hell yeah.
Who are like, oh, I know how to get these youngins to pay attention. Science fiction. So that was fun. So I guess Mr. Smith, if you're listening, thanks. Also turn this off because it's weird. I am relentlessly horny now, so sorry.
You've been warned.
Yeah, I mean, this episode is super fun. It is, like you said, up top, how it does kind of set up the idea of, like, how Bad Blood was able to be made of, like, different perspectives. But also, like, I think that, you know, at the end of all of the credit scenes, like, the truth is out there, blah, blah, blah. But that is really important, right? Like, your memory and truth can be subjective. And so, like, I mean, that's Mulder's, like, you know, white whale or whatever is like his burden to bear is like, yeah, but what is the truth, dude? Like,
yes.
When you find out something, it's like, oh, yeah, they were abducted by aliens, except for the aliens are people and the flying saucers are military things. And like, but maybe the flying saucers were inspired by actual UFOs that were found, and they were real aliens, but were those aliens actually human? And I just like, I feel bad for Mulder. Like, you could have,
yes,
your life's work is never ever going to be finished.
Absolutely.
Sorry, kid.
The missing pilot in the diner
Jack
is talking to him about like, yeah, well, if we had an American ship fly over enemy territory, they would just shoot us down. But you see something you don't understand, and people pause, and that gives you time to react in other ways, which like makes a shitload of sense.
Right. And in this episode, it's like, well, maybe we made these ships to look weird, but blah, blah, blah. But then like in later episodes, it's like, oh no, these are maybe alien ships that were just like piloting and we don't really know how to pilot them, which is a great like layer. And it's weird to watch these types of episodes out of order, but like I can see how, even though I think the aliens are the most boring part, I can see how that mythology builds on itself. It's like, oh, we learned this from Big Ron, and then we learned this, and then we learned this. Yeah, pouring out for Big Ron. I also just love episodes where it's a lot of Scully trying to explain something and people being like, you believe that? She's like, well, I don't believe it, but I was there.
Yeah. I can't really explain exactly what happened, but these are the facts as I understand it and
I
can
love that
interpret
she's
them.
constantly being put in the position of both defending her skepticism but not throwing Mulder under the bus.
Yes, and I think this thread's like a really good line where she's like, I personally don't care about either of these terms, experiencer versus abductee, but my partner prefers this one. And like, I personally think that hypnosis is very subjective because people are bound to confabulation when this kind of thing happens. But Mulder has had these experiences which lead him to believe this. Like, I think
and because Mulder is the most leading, like, investigator ever.
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
How many times does Scully have to be like, you did that. Like the thing that you think just happened, you gave them the answer and then they gave you what you wanted to hear. It's like, I don't think that's what happened. It's like, I was there. That's exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. But also I think that they do a good job later too in Bad Blood of building on like Scully's memories are also subjective. Like at this point in Jose Chung, we're kind of thinking of her as like a reliable narrator where she's willing to say, I don't remember this, or there are things about this.
At least for the first half, because there's a part where she loses her memory too, and she's like, I don't actually know what happened.
But she is like willing to say that at least. And so it's not just like, oh, I'm going to make something up, or like you're unreliable because you have this thing that other people are saying is different. You're just willing to say that you don't remember. Whereas when we get to Bad Blood, it's like, also Scully is prone to this exact same kind of thing. And so I really like that this is like I said at the beginning, like this is the building block for where they go forward from this.
We've seen Mulder as a fanboy a bunch, so it was nice to see a little like Scully fangirl action being like, I really like all of your books. That's why I'm letting you be here and interview me. But like, I'm very excited about your books. Mm-hmm. And I also love at the end, we see Scully reading the book and we see Mulder pouting. He's not reading the book.
No.
He's like, I will read the screenplay by this insane man, but I refuse to read your fucking book, my friend.
Yep,
I'm going to watch this grainy video of Bigfoot. Instead. Thank you so much.
I like that they set up at the end too the with the overlay of Jose Chung talking about Mulder and like how does this man find pleasure. It makes it seem like, oh, of course Mulder's watching porn because he's like naked in bed like making these weird faces, and then it's like, nope, Bigfoot. This is who he is. This is Mulder as a person. And like the pilot Jack says to him at one point, like, once you fly these ships, like sex is trite, like it changes your whole life. And Mulder's like, isn't sex already trite? I don't. What? Who gives a shit about
sex is great, but have you ever piloted like an illegal like alien military ship?
It's like, have you ever broken into a military base? Because that's also pretty cool.
Yeah, I've broken in several. No big deal. I'm caught every time, but I still get in.
Somehow have never died.
I mean, for those of you who listen to this that don't know, me and Erin and Bobby are all into professional wrestling, so it was at first, when the Men in Black showed up, I was like, man, that guy looks familiar. And then as soon as he started talking, I was like, is that Jesse Ventura? Who does an amazing job in this episode.
So good.
I love that he was like, I'll do this Men in Black, but I will deliver this like a fucking wrestling promo the whole time. And it works. It
does.
works so well. Mm-hmm. And then he fucking does a backbreaker on this kid. Like, amazing.
Yes, I totally agree. And I like, too, that the Mulder, like, addresses that later, where he's like, oh, some people think that the Men in Black dress and speak and talk in a way that when you describe it, it makes you sound crazy. And he's like, what about this would make people think that you are crazy? And it's like, yeah, that's what it's like to be a professional wrestling fan.
He's so good in this.
Yes, like, he's so well cast. I totally agree.
It doesn't, because I feel like sometimes with wrestlers, but with like special guest stars or whatever, it can feel like, oh, this is a special guest star. And like Jesse Ventura was very famous and popular at the point that this came out. So like most people would have been like, I know who that guy is.
Yes.
And he doesn't feel out of place at all.
Yes, totally.
Like he's very genuinely good in this episode. Mm-hmm. I do wish that I didn't like the Alex Trebek bit. I wish that we had never seen that one's face. I liked that throughout the whole thing that you got this big booming promo from this Jesse Ventura one, then we had this one shadowed in the back, because I thought that added more mystery and made it seem like, oh, that maybe could be somebody that we know or whatever, and adds like legitimacy to it. And I thought the Alex Trebek thing was just like really cheesy. And I like cheese, but I felt like that one was like, I could have lived without that part.
I like that part because I like that you don't see him till the end. And then they make a point of saying, like, Alex Trebek. She's like, oh, he just said it was someone who looked a lot like Alex Trebek. And so you get this, like, additional layer of, like, Mulder is the most unreliable fucking narrator of all time. So I like that it's like, Mulder, you just watch a lot of daytime television. And, like, you just pulled this out of your brain and, like, imposed this man's face. And you do get this contrast of, like, professional wrestler who is being extremely aggro and this, like, really calm presence who then does the, like, hypnosis thing, too. Where he's like, you're very relaxed, you're very calm. That originally was supposed to be Johnny Cash, which I feel like is a very weird choice. And I feel like Alex Trebek compared with Johnny Cash, Alex Trebek is a much better choice.
Yeah, because, I mean, Johnny Cash has more comparable pro wrestling vibes, too. It would have just been like these two exist in the same kind of universe. Where Alex Trebek and Jesse Ventura feel like they exist outside of each other's universes and are working together.
Right.
Which is a better vibe.
Yeah, I agree.
I just can't get over how good Jesse Ventura is.
I know, he's so good.
He's really good at this episode.
Good. He has, like, Shakespearean monologue energy,
he
too.
crushes it.
Yeah, it's excellent. He does, like, the big arm gestures, too, and you're just like, God damn, you're good at this.
He's really good at this. I love that when he's interrogating Rocky or whatever, and Rocky's like, I'm a Republican!
Yeah. Yes.
I do not understand how this girl's parents allowed her to be hypnotized twice.
I told you while we were watching it, in my opinion, it's one of those situations where parents will believe anything except that their daughters have sex. So they're like, sure, let her be hypnotized again. She was abducted by aliens? Okay. She was abducted by the military? Great. She didn't voluntarily have sex with anyone? That's what I wanted to hear. Like, that's
So
my
ridiculous.
headcanon.
My headcanon is that hypnotist is on Mulder's speed dial.
Yes. 100%. You also notice, too, that he's wearing the same outfit both times, which I think is another unreliable narrator thing, where it's like, we just pull this person in and we just remember what we want to remember. And, like, are these even different sessions? Like, do we even remember this correctly? All we remember is, like, this is the hypnotist. This is what he looked like.
The best line in this whole episode, though, was, I want to be abducted by aliens so I don't have to worry about finding a job.
Both of us immediately relatable.
At the same time, relatable.
That's why I like Blaine. He's such a good character because, like, he's, especially when this was written and in the year that it came out, like, in 96, he's weird and silly and, like, I didn't play D&D for all of those years to not learn a little something about courage. And, like, now people are like, yeah, Blaine's relatable. Like, fuck capitalism. I don't want a job. I play a lot of D&D. Like, these are things we can all be like, yeah, I can get down with this kid.
Also, I don't know if I noticed this correctly because it was just, like, a quick thing that I noticed and then it went away and his bedroom never came back. But it looked like, for me, at a moment that he had a very similar poster to the I Want to Believe poster on the wall, but it just said I believe instead of I want to believe, which I loved because he was like, I read a lot of alien lore, not because I have to, but because I want to, because I believe in aliens and I'm going to get abducted so I don't have to get a job. And I just love the juxtaposition of Mulder being like, I need to find the truth, I want to believe, and this kid being like, I believe, I'm ready.
Yes, I agree.
And I guess we got that shriek moment too. The captions just say shriek. And I've seen that clip before in, like, one of those videos that you made. The
X-Files crack. Yeah.
The X-Files crack I've seen before where he's just like, ah! Stone face.
Yeah.
It's a good delivery.
I love the way that Blaine describes them. It's one of them was dressed as a woman, but not pulling it off. Like, it's
her hair. Red,
too red. It's great because it's also, like, the kind of complaints that people who don't like the X-Files make about these characters, that, like, she's just this ridiculous fake bottle redhead. He's just this emotionless mandroid. And it's like, well, yes, those things are true, but you also need the context of them. And I love, too, the idea that to an outsider who's never met Mulder and Scully, they're like, yeah, they're men in black. They are federal agents. And like Jose Chung says at the end, like, she's super smart. She's like...
brainy beauty.
Absolutely. But also she works for the feds. And she's just like, what the fuck? And
she's like, yeah. I never really think about myself like that. But, oh, damn.
And like, that's how I feel about Scully too, where it's like, I love Scully. I love the Scully effect in many ways. But also, she's a fucking fed. And like, we just like let that go a lot. That they
As you wear your destroy brutality bloody shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just something that you're willing to look past where it's like they are cops. They fundamentally
But
work
we
for
like
the
them
FBI.
because they're like space cops.
And they like subvert from the inside or whatever. And Mulder's like, fuck the government.
I love a scene of Scully waking up and being like, Mulder slept here, whatever.
Yeah, I'm not worried in any way that he's in my room. I'm just like, how the fuck did you? I don't remember letting you in, and that concerns me. He just picks the lock, comes in, and sleeps in the chair in his clothes. That has happened. That's definitely happened
100%.
while they've been on the road. There's no question. He's like, I lost my key. I just broke into your room. She's like, why didn't you break into your room? Oh no, I didn't think about
I
it.
really didn't think about it. Yeah, this episode's really fun, and I am delighted to finally know the episode that I watched many moons ago that started it all.
Yes. I'm glad that it only took us till the beginning of season 2 to find it.
Well,
too.
when I initially described it, you were like, I think it's Jose Chung, and I was like, I have no idea.
That means nothing to me. All right, some fan lore, apocrypha, etc., etc. So this is a Darren Morgan episode.
He's so good.
Something that I have discovered through doing extracts is that I fucking love Darren Morgan.
Yeah,
And like
he's the best.
He's by far my favorite writer. This is his last episode on the series until season 10 when he comes back for the revival. Spoilers, we will be getting to that really soon. Super, super soon. So this was inspired by readings that he'd done about hypnosis and as well as the theory that UFOs are actually real ships that are piloted by the military, which like every time this comes up, I'm like, yes, that's the answer.
Well, you know they're not from space because they have zippers.
Exactly. Gene Roddenberry, pissed. But this alien's wearing a zipper?
The one thing we know about space is that there are no zippers there.
No. We refuse this bullshit. The episode's unique narrative style was influenced by a casting session that Morgan was in where an actor tried to mimic the vocal styling of Truman Capote, which I think is really prescient because there are so many writers who do write like that now. But in 1996, it wasn't as common, too.
Right.
So it felt even more like, okay, this is like a choice that they're making within this episode, which I liked a lot.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really talk about the writer guy. He was fantastic.
Yes. Charles Nelson Riley.
He's
Fantastic.
I like him as his character because he doesn't change from the end to the beginning. He's just like this, right? Because I would have hated if it turned out that he was like actually working for the government, and like Mulder's like, well, the publisher that you work for is actually owned by this, which is probably owned by the government, and he was like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah, and he
I
says
just
that-
write books for money. It's my job. And I liked that there was no more insidious thing with him than that. He's like, I'm a writer. This is my job. I'm interested in learning about the power of words, about the power of truth, and like the subjectivity of truth. And like, this is like an interesting assignment, but that is all it is to me. An assignment. It is my job. This is no cover up. I was really happy that he was just a writer the whole time.
I agree. And I like at the beginning, Scully asks him, like, well, why are you doing this if you don't care? And he's like, well, my publisher gave it to me. And also it's a new genre and it means that it's going to wind up the list. So money. I love money. And it's like,
So, like, it's your
yeah.
job. Like, I hate when, like, people are like, well, why do you do this? And it's like, well, yeah, I do care about this career I have, but also I do it because I literally have to because it's my job.
Because I need money. I
Yeah,
have to have
so
money to survive.
I liked the, like, honest truth of that answer.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of really interesting, like, truthful answers about, like, the way that we work as a job within capitalism inside of this episode too, which I don't know is necessary. I mean, it probably is because Darren Morgan's smart as fuck, but like not in the same way as Star Trek where it's like, we've abolished capitalism, whereas this is just, you just
We
have
attempted to abolish capitalism.
Yeah, we did our best, I guess. Whereas with this, it's just, yeah, you just have to have a job. And sometimes it really just is about money and you don't have to care. It doesn't have to be like your whole life is dedicated to this. So I agree. I like that he just stays with inside of that. The character was originally supposed to be played by Rip Taylor, who's famous for his very wacky mustache, and he used to shower himself with confetti, which I feel like also would have fit really well inside of the vibe of this episode. Like that, like he has like a Nigel Thornberry type look where like, yeah, would absolutely fit within this, but he wasn't available. So they went with Charles Nelson Riley, who I'm sure Bobby will talk more about once we get into his section. So I won't really go into that, but I really thought that he works so well inside of this, and like the mannerisms that he uses and the way that he like scribbles in his notebook the whole time and is like bent over while he's talking to her. I just thought all of those choices worked really fucking well. There's also just an insane amount of Easter eggs inside of this episode, which I really like. So I'm going to go through some of these. So Class County, where the the kids are abducted from was named after the skeptic Philip J. Klass, whose argument is that most UFO sightings are really the planet Venus, and it's directly invoked in this episode. That's Jesse Ventura's like, you only saw Venus. Are you telling anyone else you're a dead man? Which, like, also makes a lot of sense. Like, especially before we really understood what we were looking at when we looked in the skies, it makes a lot of sense that people are like, there's this really bright light, it's aliens. It's like, no, it's a planet.
It's just Venus.
It's just Venus out there looking real pretty. The pilots that were dressed up as aliens were named after the authors Robert Schaefer and Jacques Vallée, who often wrote about UFO phenomenons, and the Air Force Sergeant Hynek was named after a UFO researcher, Dr. J. Allen Hynek. The character of Rocky Crickinson is his last name, the one who writes the
Didn't
screenplays.
need to know his last
I
name.
know. I don't think they ever mention it in the episode.
That's the dartboard for sure.
Well, it's actually not, because he's named after the musician Rocky Erickson, who has claimed to have been abducted by aliens. And so,
Is that why his name was spelled so specifically?
yes, absolutely.
We watch with subtitles because I like to watch TV with subtitles, and so we see all of the like interesting
Super weird
spelling
spellings.
of everybody's name. And I appreciate that whoever does the captions for the X-Files gets the weird spelling right.
Yes, I absolutely agree. So yes, that is a deliberate choice. So I like that Darren Morgan is being very specific about this stuff. Jose Chung gives Mulder the pseudonym gives Mulder this the pseudonym Reinhard after the legendary fox, which like absolutely makes sense. It's like smart dartboard. It's like
Also, it makes Darren Morgan look smart, but like that feels like something that Jose Chung would do.
absolutely 100%. It like fits into the story that they're telling about all of these characters. The alien autopsy video, Dead Alien Truth or Humbug, is a direct reference to Morgan's first episode for the series, Humbug, which is about the freak show, as well as the real alien autopsy fact or fiction video that Fox aired in 1995. So like it is a absolutely like shot for shot recreation of big parts of that video too. So I love the idea that Fox was like, yeah, let's poke fun at this. Like we did air this super weird alien videotape that has this like mysterious man walking in the background and like, who is this alien autopsy doctor? And I love Scully watching it and be like, oh, this is so embarrassing. Like also great parallels to the Trek episode where it's like you see this very competent person being like, God, I'm so embarrassed by my own actions. Why did this come back to haunt me? Like, I just love how she's just like, oh God, I hate this so much. Why am I involved with this fucking idiot? Detective Manners, the swearing cop, is directly named after Kim Manners, and the character's tendency to swear in that manner is a direct reference to Kim Manners, who used to famously say on set, let's kick it in the ass. So I love that that Darren's like, this is the last time I'm writing for this show. I'm going to pull in as much shit as I possibly can. Lieutenant Schaefer, when they're sitting in the diner and he's pushing those potatoes around, that's a reference to the shape of the mountain in the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Oh, yeah.
And so is Rocky's job at the power company lineman is the same job that Richard Dreyfuss has in that movie.
Darren is so smart.
He's so fucking smart. Lord Kimbo is an homage to Ray Harryhausen.
Do you mean the Terran Lord Kimbo? Can't be an alien if you've come from inside the Earth.
You fucking nerd. Shut up.
Just saying.
He has a spaceship. He beamed people up into the spaceship.
Doesn't
so he
matter.
flies around
We
in the
fly
sky.
in space too. Doesn't make us aliens.
I mean, we might be considered aliens to other things.
Yeah, but not to people on our planet. He's a Terran.
All right, fine, whatever. He's an homage to Roy Harryhausen, who's a stop-motion animator. And so the footage of the character, that, like, weird alien.
It felt very Clash of the Titans.
Yes. So they shot that at high speed, and then they edited it and manually slowed it down in post-production to create the illusion that it was done via stop-motion, which I really
thought it was
like.
stop motion.
They
It's
do
really effective.
Yeah, they do a really fucking good job of it. So, like I said, this is the last one for his Darren Morgan's episode for the series before he comes back in 2016.
Why?
He found it really difficult to work on the show. He didn't like the way that scripts were re-edited afterwards. He found that when things aired, like, you haven't seen Humbug, have you? Is that the first season?
We haven't seen Humbug. It's on the list.
Okay. I've said this before on Extracts that when he watched it, he got so depressed he became suicidal.
Oh, that's right.
But it's an amazing episode. And so I think part of it for him was he was just like, I just can't deal with my work being reinterpreted in a way that, like, even if it's good and people love it,
Honestly,
it's not what I
he's
wanted.
Such a specific writer, because most of the time if I had heard that, I would have rolled my eyes on my head and been like, that's the medium you work in. That is what this whole process is about. Stop being a precious baby. But he is such a talented and specific writer and is actually worth the hype of being like, please don't change my vision, that I can totally see why he was like, I can't do this.
I just can't do it anymore. Yeah, exactly. And so he also said he just like couldn't keep up with the frantic pace of the show. He found it like really hard to deal with.
Yeah, if you write an episode that detailed, it probably takes a lot longer than like wham bam, thank you ma'am, here's a Bigfoot.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so he went on to write a really similarly themed episode, Jose Chung's Doomsday Defense, for the series Millennium, too. So he does do more television writing after that. He just couldn't deal with the X-Files anymore. The cast and crew of the X-Files really loved working on this. Gillian Anderson said it was among the highlights of her third season. She said that the episode was like a dessert, adding that it's what kept it fun and that's what kept it worth doing all of the time. Chris Carter had amazing things to say about Darren Morgan. Even as he was leaving the show, he said that it was wonderful to work with him all the time. He talked about the quality of his writing and the way that he really enjoyed everything that he did with him, you know, when he wasn't out like surfing or fucking whatever. Everybody also loved working with Charles Nelson Riley. They said that he captivated virtually everyone and he gave everyone a lift. He gave everyone on the crew a nickname, which I find absolutely fucking delightful. But I feel like it's also probably because he's one of those guys who's like, I don't remember your name. And so he just comes up with a name and he's like, you're a Skip, you're a Barb, you're Pal over there. And like that totally fits with his personality too, which I like a lot. One of the executive producers, Robert Goodwin, said that casting Riley was the most fun episode of like any of the series, which is really saying something because they really have some like incredible, even inside of this episode, like there's some really great guests inside of this. So some of the critical reaction, Emily Vanderweyf from the AV Club wrote that this episode is one of the very finest of television ever written. If the X-Files were a Lord of the Rings length novel, Jose Chung's would be its first appendix, a source that is at once in love with the main text and critical of it, a place where real human concerns creep around the edges of the show's silly and chilly impossibilities, which is totally true. Like, this is, again, it's very much the beginning of like Bad Blood and Hollywood AD, where they become very meta about the show, but this is like that first block of that where it's like you can love the thing you're writing about and also be very critical about like other people looking in on this might think like, what the fuck is this shit?
Totally.
So I like that a lot. The biggest complaint at the time, which I find really fucking weird, is that it doesn't contribute to the series as a whole, which I totally disagree with.
Absolutely.
And like, I understand it's season 3, so
People
it's early.
are so attached to the mythology and didn't understand that the best parts of the show is the world building of the show and the like character building of the show, and the mythology is like really secondary. Which like I understand, like this is a different type of show. Like it is really like making a new formula in many ways, but it's also just like, ugh, get over yourselves.
And I think that because this is so early, I can understand how people were like, this is strange and is like a real
especially
diversion.
after like season 1, which is like so heavily, and I haven't seen a lot of season 2, but I know at least starts off really like mythology heavy. I can see how it would be like a different jump.
Right, but then to like now with the context of everything, like this sets the tone for a lot of the stuff that comes later that again becomes very meta and becomes very like self-critical, but in a really good way. Like this is one of those episodes that the X-Files is still trying to figure out what they are, even into season 3. And this was one of those episodes that was like, you can be whatever the fuck you want to be.
You can be whatever you want to be.
And like people will love it. And again, this is an episode that people love. Like when asked to put in my top like 25, I don't even think this is in my personal top 25. There are lots of things I like about this episode, but there's just enough that I'm like, okay, I can kind of let this one go. I would never skip it on a series rewatch, but it's not one that I ever think to like pull out individually because I'd rather watch Bad Blood. Right,
because you have a more personal relationship with the characters and stuff, and this is a good standalone episode.
Right, exactly. Yes, that's IGN said it was the 4th best standalone X-Files episode in the entire series, saying that Jose Chunks from Outer Space showed the X-Files could create a true comedy masterpiece that almost completely breaks away from the show's usual format and tone. And again, like that's what makes this series great, is that there are opportunities to break away from the mythology, and ultimately that's what draws a lot of people in and makes them like hardcore fans of this show. Yeah. So I'm really glad we got a chance to get to this episode as early as we did. I think it's very funny that you've seen this episode already and did not remember it.
How old are you in 9th grade? 14?
14, 15, yeah.
I was 14.
Very funny. Also funny that you like I feel like one of the things I remember most about this episode is Jesse Ventura. And so it's very funny to me that you came back to wrestling and like that never connected.
Well, I mean, again, I have a transcendently bad memory.
True.
When I was describing this episode to you, all I could remember, because you were like, well, describe it to me. I can tell you what episode that was. And the reason that we didn't know, because I didn't give you a lot of information, I was like, there's a road and there's somebody driving on the road and then there's like a bright light and then maybe a person or an alien. And that is all I remember. And you were like, so that could be a lot of things, but I bet it's Jose Chung.
Yeah, Bobby was the one who was like, I'm almost positive it's Jose Chung. I thought it was either this one or Dwayne Barry, which would be a fully different, like, that would be really wild. We'll get to that one later in this season, but that's a very different tone.
Yeah. Well, this makes sense now that I've seen it again, not only as a standalone episode, but specifically to watch in an English class.
Yes, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. Again, good teaching. That was a good teacher.
Good job, Mr. Smith.
Good job. Like, you shouldn't be listening. We told you to turn this off. But if you are still listening, great job.
I don't know. I'm 32 now. If you want to listen to me be a horn dog, go for it.
Some time has passed. All right, you ready for Synopsis Showdown?
Oh, no. But, okay.
All right. A kooky old man is writing a book about alien abductions, and surprise, literally everyone has a different version of the story. In the end, we learn nothing except that the only thing everyone can agree on is that Mulder is nuts.
All of Mulder's worst fears come true when he maybe discovers that aliens are a government military hoax and his paranoia is published. At least he didn't have to take a backbreaker. He really lucked out there. Look, I'm very tired.
Oh,
though I would love to watch like 6 foot whatever David Duchovny take a backbreaker.
Yes, and you know he'd love to do it. I'm sure he was like, "Can I be in the scene too, please?"
I don't know if Bobby's going to talk about this, but like, was that a stunt person or that kid take it? The kid, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
He looked like he would be a professional wrestling fan though, so like a dream probably to get back broken by Jesse Ventura.
Yeah. Took it like a champ.
You ready for Deep Thrust mission logs?
Yeah, let's do it.
Tell me about the dispersal of your Starfleet. Go climb a tree.
So, starting with Errand of Mercy, of course, this was written by Gene L. Kuhn. This is directed by John Newland. Newland was a guy who started on screen as an actor. His most famous roles was in the 1950s supernatural anthology television series, Alcoa Presents One Step Beyond. Got some acting credits down and then transitioned into some directing credits and then transitioned further into some producing credits. So just finding new ways to make money. All for that. This episode name comes from The Life and Adventures of Nicholas Nickleby by Charles Dickinson, quoting the line, "It is an errand of mercy which brings me here. Pray, let me discharge it."
Oh, Star Trek, quoting notable piece of literature. Who would have thought?
Shocking!
So, another kind of update with, of course, because we're watching these all, and all of these are the remastered version. In the original version of this, we don't see any Klingon vessels. After TOS was done and we saw more of the Klingons, as Stella was talking about in TNG and other things, they went back and they put some of those Klingon vessels back into this episode when they were remastering, just kind of keep everything further in universe. Stella also talked about how Kor comes back as a character.
Kor.
And it's actually that same actor who does it as well. I'll talk about that.
Oh, yeah, and also in a couple of Deep Space, at least one Deep Space Nine episode that he's in, he talks about Kirk. And be like, yeah, I fucked with that dude.
But before that happens, we actually see Kor's baldric, that kind of gold sash that he
Sashy
wears.
thing,
Yeah. That's actually the same baldric that Worf wears in the first season of TNG. That exact same one. When it was exhibited at the Smithsonian Institute as part of Star Trek Retrospective in the 90s, the material could clearly be seen as burlap sack painted gold.
Nothing but the best for Worf.
Listen, they didn't know if that show was going to survive the first season either.
First season Worf has a lot going on.
A lot
he gets
going
so
on.
hot by DS9 or in the end of TNG, but the first season with the Bob is rough. Rough for Worf.
The set we see here where Kirk and Spock simultaneously shoot the two Klingons and they dramatically fall, one from Astoria and one down a height. That's the exact same set that we see in The Cage where Pike fights that like big grumpy alien spear guy. pretty noticeably.
That's their name. Big grumpy aliens. Big guy.
I don't know the name of that. Spock's line when he sees the Organians transform into their being, pure energy. That line was used as a sound clip by the band Information Society in their 1988 song, What's on Your Mind? That song reached number 3 on the Billboard charts.
Hell
and
yeah.
so Nimoy got a special thanks and probably some bank off that.
Dope.
As well as reappearing in Trek again, which we'll talk more about in a bit. Kor makes several appearances in Star Trek novels, one including The Tears of the Singers, in which he allies with Kirk against human criminals and then against a mutiny on his own Klingon ship. So it's more of them kind of trading barbs. There's also a comic book published by IDW in 2007 called Against Their Nature, which is this exact episode told completely from the Klingon side of things.
Ooh, interesting.
And then, as we were getting at, one of the episodes that Kor comes back in is The Sword of Kalish, which Worf tells an elderly Kor, now Berridged, but played by the same actor,
Berridged.
that he had heard stories about Kor since he was a child, including Kor's confrontation with Kirk on Organia, this exact episode. The Organians themselves, they show up in a Star Trek Enterprise episode, Observer Effect. And there's also a novel called The Sorrows of Empire, in which the Treaty of Organia is signed between the Terran Empire and the Klingon Empire in the Mirror Universe.
Oh.
So this kind of happens in both universes, and it's always the Organians.
Yeah, in Spock Must Die, it's less about the treaty and stuff and is more about trying to figure out how they were able to be on their planet and then 2 other planets, and it was more about like transwarp beaming, and they try and do that with Spock, and he splits into 2, and you have like, they're like, which Spock is the right Spock? Are they both Spock? And like, is one bad? Is one good? Oh, one Spock must die.
Because of how wide-reaching fan lore got with novels and comic books and all of that for Star Trek, there's also conflicting information as to whether the Organians' powers extend beyond their solar system, with one novel saying that they can't, and that's why they don't just solve all world problems everywhere, and one saying they can, and so they could do wackadoo shit like that.
Or they're just like the Eternals, and they're like, we don't fuck
don't
around
fucking care.
until we have to, and then we don't really want to anymore. Anyways, that movie looks boring.
Jumping to some casting stuff. That is George Sawaya, as we see as a second Klingon soldier here. We also see him as a Klingon crewman in Day of the Dove.
Which is a great episode.
We see him as Chief Humboldt in The Menagerie Part 1. He also did 10 episodes of Mission Impossible as uncredited guard characters, and 2 episodes of Get Smart, where he's listed as Jack the Ripper / werewolf. So, Stell, you might want to watch that, because it might be Jack the Ripper turning into a werewolf.
I do love werewolves.
He's also in the live-action Batman the movie after the live-action series as Ketch, and has stunt credits in Escape from New York, and is the first Repo victim in the very underrated 1980s Repo Man movie. That's Walt Davis as a Klingon guard, also has repeated background stunt credits in The Bionic Woman, The Police Woman, and Wonder Woman.
Loves a woman show.
Loves a woman show. Notable as being the tall Klingon who is talking to Kor and also gets jumped in the hallway. That's Victor London, who's just listed as Lieutenant here. Right before this, he was Friday in Robinson Crusoe on Mars. He was also Chief Standing Pat and Octopus in the Batman live-action series. As Claymare, who is the older of the Organians, mostly off to the right.
The one that smiles weird and is like, I can see in the sky.
I think so. I forget. Yeah.
Oh, no, that was like Trelane or something. Never mind. Doesn't matter.
So that one, the oldest looking one, that's Peter Bracco. His credits start all the way back in 1932 in the black and white and probably very of its time Roar of the Dragon. His IMDb takes a near whole minute to scroll through going quickly. The guy's credits are everywhere. On TV, he did episodes of Outer Limits, Time Tunnel, Lost in Space, Twilight Zone. His occasional film appearances includes the dementia patient Colonel Matters in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and a rare starring role in the black comedy Homebodies. He was also noted as being temporarily blacklisted from Hollywood during the McCarthy era because he was very liberal-minded and outspoken about it. As Trefane, as Stell mentioned earlier, that is David Hillary Hughes. He has less credits, but notably he is one of the bankers in Mary Poppins.
Yes! Oh my god, I knew I fucking recognized him. I was like racking my brain, like, how the fuck do I know this old dude? Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes. I can see him leaning over a
Yes,
worried
it's
British
like,
child.
God, you have this weird look that is so familiar somehow. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
That brings us to the last prominent Organian and most prominent Organian, Aelborn. That's John Abbott. After repertory work at Watford and Crewe, he was invited to join London's Old Vic in 1936 by Tyrone Guthrie and appeared in Love's Labour Lost and Twelfth Night. In 1937, he was in a production of Hamlet that was performed at Elsinore with Laurence Olivier and Vivian fucking Lee.
Damn!
Laurence Olivier, who's like the most overrated Shakespearean actor of
Oh
all
my god,
time.
absolutely. 100%. Vivian Lee, though, she fucks.
Yeah, she fucks.
He made his film debut in 1937 in Conquest of Air. He worked for the British Embassy in Moscow during World War II and then bounced right back into acting. Tennessee Williams wrote a one-act play called Auto da Fe specifically for him.
Cool.
He appeared in 2 Best Picture winners for Gigi and Miss Miniver, and like every TV show from the 50s and 60s. He also voiced Wolf in the Jungle Book earlier this same year.
Damn.
That brings us to John Colicos, who played Commander Kor. This was the first appearance of Colicos as Kor. The character was set to come back both in Day of the Dub and Trouble with Tribbles, but the actor was unavailable, so they put other Klingons in there, which gave birth to other very prominent Klingon characters.
Yeah,
so that's also great.
The guy in Day of the Dove, who's the main Klingon, is very good.
Yeah. There was also a script written for Kor for the 4th season that was canceled, and then also an animated series episode called Time Trap. He was unavailable for that either, but that's fine. It was the animated series. James Doohan voiced him.
Jimmy!
Colicos is noted as being director John Newland's first and immediate choice for this role. He got the script 2 hours before hopping on his flight from Toronto to Los Angeles, read it on the
Dope.
plane, and fucking killed it.
That's dope.
Later in his career, he gets to play his other iconic villain role, which is that of Lord Baltar in the original Battlestar Galactica series.
Oh, okay.
Did you ever watch that? I tried to, and I was like, nope.
No,
I watched
can't
like
get
3
into it.
episodes, and I was like, oh, I like old sci-fi, and I
It's
cannot
very
do
of its
this.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not for me.
It's not good.
His most famous stage role was as Winston Churchill in Rolf Rolf Hawkhutch's extremely controversial Soldiers. He played the role on Broadway and in London's West End. He was also in an acclaimed leading role in a 1964 production of King Lear at Canada's Stratford Festival. Elsewhere, he has credits from the 50s all the way to 1999, returned casting for Mannix Mission Impossible, an 8-episode run as Mikos Cassadine in General Hospital, and he voiced Apocalypse in the original X-Men animated
That
series.
is awesome.
It's such a specific voice in my head that I
yeah,
could think
that
about
is
it and hear it.
awesome.
Yeah, I freaked out when I got to that.
That's the show that got me into comic books.
Nope. We will move on to Jose Chung's From Outer Space. So we know this was written by Darren Morgan, Chris Carter, John Scheiben, and directed by Bowman, who's a guy we've talked about. Really quickly about Darren Morgan, yes, his writing credits for X-Files are limited to these 7 episodes, and he writes a couple of episodes of Millennium, a couple of episodes of a show called Tower Prep, 1 episode for Those Who Kill, 2 episodes for Intruders. But he has far more producer and consulting producer credits than writer credits. And that's on shows like The X-Files, Intruders, Those Who Kill, Tower Prep, Fringe, Bionic Woman, and Night Stalker and Millennium. I think, to me, this reads as, and I understand it, he's more comfortable being a punch-up guy than having a whole script given to them. And as somebody who is in writing and in comedy, that makes a lot of sense to me because I was a lot more comfortable helping other people with their scripts, tightening them up, giving them names and shit like that than I ever was presenting my whole thing to someone else to tear apart and do what they will
Has
with.
he ever written like a book or anything?
I don't know. We should definitely look into that.
I feel like he, as somebody who hates mysteries, I feel like he would write a really good mystery.
Because he's so good at detail and
Yeah,
you're
and
saying,
like
world
weaving
building.
shit together.
Yeah, and like you were saying too, Stell, where I can understand why he would rather be a punch-up guy because it's these scripts feel like his babies.
Yes,
Like
yes.
he clearly cares
It's a lot of pressure.
about it. Yeah, I get it.
So Erin went through a lot of the lore stuff, but one odd thing that I wanted to get into is originally Jose Chung was actually an entirely fictitious character created by the writing staff as a practical joke. John Scheiban used to call the office and pretend to be Jose Chung just to annoy people and get a rise out of them.
Wow. This fucking cast and crew. Bunch of jokers.
He always would ask about the unsolicited script that he sent to the show. His repeated dismissal prompted more than a little surprise and confusion from the recipient of the calls when Chung's name turned out to be on the script for the episode. So, like, then people got in on the joke that it was a writer.
Just fucking around.
Okay, so we will get into some casting stuff for Jose Chung's. Of course, we see Jap Broker come back as the stupendous Yappy. It's Yappy.
Yeah.
Everyone's loved Yappy.
Yeah.
Erin mentioned Sergeant Philip Hynek, that's played by Michael Dobson. He was previously Marksman number 2 in the X-Files episode Dwayne Barry, which we've mentioned a bunch in this episode. That's Alan Zynick as Blaine Faulkner. He does that guy who took the backdrop and was amazing. He has a pretty limited credit listing, but he does 5 episodes of Millennium as recurring character Brian Rodecker as well. So if you want to see more of him, maybe it's time to check out Millennium.
Get just the one?
No, Millennium went on for a while.
Oh, interesting.
A few seasons. That is Larry Musser as the constantly swearing Detective Manners.
He's great. He's in like 5 different episodes of the X-Files.
We see him in Chinga, Unrequited, Hand of Verlietz. He's also done guest roles on MacGyver, Lonesome Dove, Sliders, The Commish, Millennium, and 6 episodes of The Outer Limits. The 2 therapist characters that you see in this episode, they also have quirky, funny, in-joke names for their characters. One's named Dr. Hand, and the other's named Dr. Fingers. First, we'll talk about Dr. Hand, who is the military therapist that we see briefly.
Hypnotherapist. I was like, what therapist?
Oh, yeah, sorry. The hypnotherapist. That is Mina as Dr. Hand. He voiced Talpa in Ronin Warriors, which was one of the first series that was transferred over from anime and Japanese voice acting to American acting right around the time Sailor Moon was. Oh. And actually, they played, I think, back to back. Ronin Warriors was one of my entrances in anime, so it was really cool for me to read. He also voiced Tung Fu-Fei in the Fatal Fury games and did more voices on Hurricanes. Live action wise, he did guest appearances on the Highlander TV series, Kung Fu: The Legend Continues, Sliders, and movies like The 13th Warrior, Chronicles of Riddick, and Scary Movie 4. And as Dr. Fingers, it's another Darren Morgan beloved actor. That's Alex Daikun. I'm not going to talk about him here. We've already seen him as the tarot reader from Clyde Bruckman, but we'll see him again very soon.
Yes.
I might have mentioned this last time we talked about him, but most recently we've seen him as Cassius in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. So he's still out there being a creepy dude.
He's great at it.
Harold Lamb is played by Jason Gaffney. He did a bunch of voices in that weird 90s American mech cartoon show, Exo Squad. I remember having action figures from that. He does 4 episodes of Sliders as a character named Conrad and appears also on Outer Limits and SG-1 like every other working actor did. Opposing him, that's Sarah Sawatsky as Chrissy Giorgio. She was a recurring character named Kathleen on Murphy's Law, Jess on Danger Bay, Lucia Bordertown, and multiple voices on Captain Z and the Z-Zone, and then voiced Mai in the Fatal Fury 2 video game. So weird Fatal Fury cross-casting here. Going up the list from that, we have Alex Trebek. Yes, that is just Alex Trebek. His IMDb is filled with him playing Alex Trebek in other things and other appearances. Also funny to note, David Duchovny and Alex Trebek previously appeared together in a 1995 episode of Celebrity Jeopardy.
They sure the fuck did.
That episode was won by Stephen King.
That episode is...
Who else is it? Stephen King, David Duchovny. Who's the third?
I don't know that. I'd have to look that up.
Well, I'm going to look it up because I want to know.
What's the line that...
Having read a David Duchovny book.
Says... There's a very funny clip of him, of someone answering, what are, whatever, and him going, what are, whatever.
Yes. Moving one more.
Stephen King, Lynn Redgrave, and David Duchovny.
There it is.
Well, there you go. That's a crew.
Damn.
Moving one up the list, now we get to Jesse Ventura as our first Man in Black. He's the Body. He's a very, very famous pro wrestler and a commentator. He was also in 80s action flicks opposite his good friend Arnold Schwarzenegger, like The Running Man and Predator. He's also former mayor and governor of Minnesota. Yes, that backdrop was real. Also, it looks very gently done.
Yeah, it was gentle,
Yeah,
but
he was a pro.
still, he still got to do it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Notably about Ventura, Stell said he is a very complicated individual.
dude.
However, when he was in wrestling originally, he was great friends with Hulk Hogan until Jesse Ventura tried to unionize the wrestlers in WWF back in the day. Hulk Hogan fucking snitched him out to Vince McMahon.
Yeah, because Hulk Hogan is
Sucks.
trash.
Sucks.
If you are listening to this and you have fond memories of Hulk Hogan from your childhood, I hate to break it to you, but your memories are trash and he is trash and you should reevaluate that.
You should really read about who he is as a person.
He's a bad guy.
He's a
So
bad dude.
that happened in the 80s, and Jesse didn't know about it until the 90s. And
And
that's
then he was like, I'm gonna kill him.
yeah, he was like, fuck Hulk Hogan. He is not my friend anymore.
Good for him.
So we've talked about him a couple times as well. That's Daniel Quinn as Lieutenant Jack Schaefer. At 17, he became a member of the International Thespian Society and traveled to London to study at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. While in Europe, he also studied at the Royal Shakespeare Company at Stratford-upon-Avon. He's also a trained classical dancer and was a soloist for the Joffrey 2, the company that existed while the Joffrey Ballet was on brief hiatus.
Wow.
Multiple Broadway runs in West Side Story and Woman of the Year. David Lynch handpicked him for his role in Wild at Heart as Tom Minks. He won an Emmy in '92 for his role as Emilio in Lady Boss, and then went on to guest in a bunch of things on TV after that.
He's the one that's the pilot in the diner?
Yes.
He's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was really good.
Also pretty cute.
Yes. Also a continuing theme of actors using their sway to also be activists. Daniel was a leading force against the closure of the motion picture homes for long-term care. He raged with SAG and all that. That was the famous Hollywood home that would take care of actors who had gone through a life of probably horrible drugs and abuse from being an actor of that time.
Yeah.
Being abused by the studios that their lives were in
Yeah.
contractual chains with.
Right. That's William Lucking as Rory Crickenson. Earlier on in his career, often seen as a biker and hippie in those types of films in the 60s and 70s. In 1986, he and Dana Elcar co-founded the Santa Paula Theater Center in Santa Paula. He played Harlan Pike in Outlaws. He did 5 guest roles on Murder, She Wrote.
Yep, sure did.
He was,
I knew I recognized him.
he was Byron Metcalf in Red Dragon and Piney Winston on Sons of Anarchy. Also an author, and also played Bajoran Resistance fighter Furel on 3 episodes of DS9.
Nice.
And Orion Privateer Haran Sar on Enterprise. So also just a dude who fucking loves Star Trek.
Truck it up.
And
Or
that
loves a paycheck. One of the two.
Yeah. And that brings us to Charles Nelson Reilly. There's a lot you could say about Charles Nelson Reilly. I know him mostly from his appearances on Laugh-In and guest panel shows like that. I'm going to pull some brief things from his bio on IMDb, starting with, in 1944, he had a traumatic experience where he was at Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, and a fire broke out that killed 167 people and injured 700 people.
Oh my God.
And after that, he swore off attending public performances of theater and circus as a patron for fear of another fire.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's bad.
But he did go into acting, and in the 1960s, he gained his first critical attention as his part in the Broadway musical Bye Bye Birdie. In 61, he joined the cast of the musical How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, and he won his first...
white male.
Yeah, like a white male.
He's got that look. White.
That's the plot, everybody. That's the resolution. Be a white male.
He played Bud Frump, and he won a Tony Award for it in 62. Charles Nelson Reilly was famous for being openly and brazenly gay in the 60s, which is why...
Oh, you don't say.
Which is why that's another reason why I think he was also a great sub-in for Rip Taylor, because Rip Taylor was another one of those famous gay...
Yes.
It's like the two of them and Paul Lynde. And those are always the gay guys that you see on those panel shows in the 60s.
The gay game show triumvirate.
Yes.
He recalled a network executive telling him they don't let queers on television, and as a rebuttal, he became a famous queer on television, guesting on shows like The Match Game, Hollywood Squares, and did like 95 episodes of The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He later blames his prominence on shows like that as him getting less acting roles for the time, because he was just a famous guest and comedian and not really taken as an actor.
He's fantastic in this episode.
He goes to, and while like in that casting lull, he goes to direct on Broadway and get nominated for more Tonys doing that. In the 2000s, he was primarily known for his autobiographical stage play, Save It for the Stage, The Life of Riley, and its film adaptation. He was just a really cool guy, and I think he nailed this role, and he's also just as good in the Millennium episode. So I would say definitely check that out. And that's it. We still haven't figured out a way to wrap up this segment, huh?
We just stare at you until you're like, I'm done now.
And that's all that's in my throat this week.
Oh my God.
I don't know what was most disturbing. His description of the inner core reincarnated soul's sex orgy, or the fact that the whole thing is written in screenplay format.
It definitely was peculiar.
So, the theme is retcon. Mine is like this was introduced in TOS and then was retconned or fixed or explained away in the rest of the series because it's hard to retcon something from the first season of an entire empire.
Yes.
So mine is a future retcon, but it's an important one, right? Like,
Yeah.
Klingons are a big deal.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we talked about it too, because again, when you have no knowledge of Star Trek and all you know are the Ridgie boys, and then you see these dudes, it's like, what the fuck?
What the fuck?
And then my episode is more about the retcon of stories within the actual story
The
itself.
subjectivity of truth.
Unreliable narrators, they exist.
How well do these episodes tie together?
There's a lot of bright lights in both of them.
And characters being embarrassed by themselves. And look, sometimes.
In Kirk wrestling with being in the military and Scully wrestling with being a Fed, you see people who are in authority struggling against it.
All right, for casual fan questionnaire, as a casual fan, would you recommend this episode to a newbie?
I don't know. I would not recommend it as the first episode.
Yeah,
like we
no,
talked
that would have
about.
been a mistake.
Yeah. A newbie as like within your first 20 episodes of watching the show, like we
Maybe
were.
within, I don't know, your first 26 if you're watching from the beginning.
Well, now we're casual fans. Now
I know.
now I have the authority of a casual fan. But I feel like we could have put this in the first season, and I still would have been like, yeah, I get it. This is because, like you said before, there are a lot of greater themes within Star Trek. It's just that they're shoved into the last 5 minutes of the episode, which makes it a little harder for a newbie, I think, to consume.
There are a couple episodes of Star Trek that I really like that are like that for the first, like, 2/3 of it, you're like, I hate this episode, or one of the characters is acting so out of character and it's so weird, and then it wraps it up at the end and you're like, oh wait, that was brilliant.
Yeah.
And this episode, I feel like
It fits into that.
it's that type of thing.
Definitely. Would you recommend
Yes.
this? Okay.
You could see no episode of the X-Files and watch this. Like
Yes.
it is one of those. Honestly, I know that you talk about how this sets the stage for like Bad Blood, which obviously it does with the subjectivity of truth, but it makes sense to me that Darren Morgan wrote this one really early on and then wrote The Lost Art of Forehead Sweat as like his homage to the entire series. Like
Yes.
there are a lot of parallels between those two.
Just wait till we get to his return. You just wait.
I just love Darren Morgan.
I do too. It's so strange to me that he only wrote a few episodes because
he's
they're
so
like,
fucking good.
They're my favorite episodes of the series, and like there's only like 9 of them. There aren't very many.
That's crazy.
Yeah, makes an impact.
What is a scene or moment from this episode that you won't forget?
Probably them flirting with the math. I just thought it was so charming. Like that also feels like there's a lot in this that it feels like the characters are kind of outside of themselves
Yeah.
in many. I mean, Kirk is outside of himself in many ways, but that felt like, oh yeah, this is where this series is already at. This is again, it's not subtext, it's text. Like
Well,
that
you also
I think
get
works.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because you get Kirk presented to this situation where it is forcing him to kind of act out of character, and Spock is even noticing that like Kirk is kind of acting
Losing
out
it.
of character or losing it a little bit. But like then you get to see these nice moments where like Spock is Kirk's like touchstone. Like you
Yes.
get to see like, oh no, that's the Captain Kirk that we know, and like. Let's
Yeah.
have this like hilarious, like we're in the middle of a battle, but let's like flirt about decibels.
Yes, exactly.
And
so
probability.
I think that's probably what will stick with me. And like the shot of the Klingon at the end, the like fisheye zoom lens. I just really liked the composition of that. So I think that that will stick with me as well. I mean, I know the answer to this one is the aliens at the beginning in the road for you, but other than that.
Well, yeah, because that one was the only thing that stuck with me for however, for almost 20 years. But, like, I don't know, gun to my head, I really like that moment where Rocky's like, I'm a Republican! Like, you can't just come into my house. I support the government. Or, like, I support the, like, you guys taking care of business without telling anybody. I'm a Republican. I thought it was really funny.
That's so funny. That's your moment.
Also the moment where Jack is being taken away and he's like, what about the other alien? And he's like, oh, you mean Lord Kimbo? And then just walks away and we get no more information about that. It's like, wait, so was he real? Is he not real? Who is Lord Kimbo? That was a great throwaway line.
Yes, I agree. I love that they don't address it.
It's a very where are they taking Reggie line. Like,
yes.
Which makes sense that it's a Darren Morgan episode.
Yep, 100%. Absolutely.
Are you shipping anybody? I guess if you had to, it would be Spurk.
Yeah, it would be Spurk. I also do like that there's that establishment at the beginning, too, where they're like, oh, we're taking the Vulcan away. And he's like, you'll do no such thing with my fucking boyfriend. Like, there is that, too, of, like, their relationship is clearly very important to Kirk. And so I feel like it's not just the math flirting. It is this, like, they have this commitment to each other and they are both very concerned about each other's well-being. So I feel like that. I'm not usually a Spurk shipper. And I feel like
Shocking.
there's no
guess
Bones.
you're like a mixed Spurk shipper or you're a Spones or you're a mixed Spurk shipper because Bones is you can't have him be left out. I get it.
He can't be
can't be
baby
baby,
because
but
he's an old man. But
Bones cannot be baby.
well, I'd be so mad if he called him baby.
But I can appreciate not wanting a specific character left out.
I'm normally not drawn to that, but because Bones literally doesn't exist in this episode at all, I guess I'm going with Spurk. Did you ship anyone in this episode?
I don't know, Mulder in that pie. That's all I got. This is not a shippy episode.
No, not in any way, shape, or form. I mean, there's him waking up in her
right.
room.
But say there's the friendship thing that I like, where it's like they are established as being in each other's pockets and like existing in each other's orbits and like that build. So I like that. I love that scene of her being like waking up and not even questioning, being like, he's here, whatever.
And I guess too, that's another way that these episodes tie together, because in the same way that Kirk is like, I'm very protective of how you might harm my friend. When Mulder comes in and sees the Men in Black, he's like, I will shoot you dead. Like, how dare you get up?
You leave her alone. She's just getting ice.
It's like, wait, what? So I like that as well. But yeah, I agree. This isn't really a shippy episode.
Yeah. Is this a fuck, fine, or flop?
It's hard because the last 5 minutes are a fuck for sure. But I hated these aliens so deeply and completely. I think it brings me to like a fine plus.
That's fair.
It's right on the edge of fuck minus fine plus, but I feel like because 70% of the episode was more fine than fuck, then I'm at a fine plus for this.
That's fair.
Where would you put this episode?
It's a fuck.
Yeah, it's hard not to be.
It's a fuck.
There's a reason that people cite it as their favorite episode like all the time. It makes sense. I get it.
This is a pro Darren Morgan podcast.
Hell yeah, it is. Darren Morgan, we love you. You can find us on the internet. You can follow us at NYD Productions on Twitter, and you can interact with the show using the hashtag XTrexPod. You can find me at NYD Urgency on Instagram.
You can find me on Twitter at Stella_Cheeks.
And you can find me on Twitter at Haberdasher9K.
You can also email us at xtrexpod@gmail.com with questions, comments, and let's be real, like most fic is just like a retcon because people are like, oh, well, fuck the writers. Let's do what we want. Let's create our own headcanon. So yeah, duh, I got the links. I got all the links. Just tell me what you want. I got it.
Jesus. Aggressive. I aggressively have the links.
I am aggressive about my fanfic.
Are there Kirk Corfic?
I'm sure.
What would you call that?
be.
Core?
Cork.
Cork?
I'm sure if there's corfics, I bet it's like older, like 70s stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't want to see them fuck, so I've never read it, but...
And if you want more special behind-the-scenes action, like our hilarious script notes, outtakes from all of our episodes that will amass tens of minutes, extra podcasts like unofficial channels, and access to our Discord and special YouTube videos, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/NYD Productions, where you can get access to all that for only $1.
And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and to tell your friends. We find this nerdy shit is better when it's shared.
We'll see you next episode for the Body Swap Again episode. In the meantime,
Believe boldly.
Seek truth.
ship proudly.
X-Trex is created and written by Stella Cheeks, Erin Cline, and Bobby Hoffman, and produced by Bobby Hoffman for NYD Productions. Our show theme is Alien Spy by Ionix, and our show art was made by Jonathan Curtis.
Fascinating. Pure energy. Pure thought. Totally incorporeal. Not life as we know it at all.
But what about this planet?
Venus was at its peak brilliance last night. You probably thought you saw something up in the sky other than Venus. But I assure you, it was Venus.